Toot toot, all aboard. The hype train is leaving the station. Your conductors for this journey, Riley Knight, Simon Gertson, an express trip to Value Town, ladies and gentlemen. It is the quarterfinals here at Pro Tour Dominaria, live out of Richmond, Virginia in the United States of America. We couldn't be more excited, and we're about to head down to the feature match area right now to get underway. Let's get to it. The quarterfinals are upon us. What's up, nerds? Welcome along to the quarterfinal coverage at Pro Tour Dominaria. You're joined by me in the booth, Riley Knight, and him, the Pro Tour champion, Simon Gertson. Simon, so good to have your company as we continue this onslaught of red-black aggro. We got one mono-red deck in the feature match area. We got three red-black aggro lists aside from that. Couple of twists in the tail there, but let's meet the players we'll be watching first up. Of course, here he is, Owen Turtenwald, the Pro Tour Hall of Famer, the O-Rat, Simon. He is on red-black, and his opponent all the way out of Austria, it is Manuel Lenz. These guys playing a rather similar list, Simon. You went across both of them at the desk recently. As we head into this match here, who are you watching as an early favourite?
I have Owen favored, but not only in this matchup, but simply because I think he is probably favored to take this event down. The way he plays is just exceptional. And to be fair, he is facing against a deck of Lenz, which is kind of interesting because Lenz has decided to play black mana sources, so he's not going for the 24 mountain strategy, but he does not have black cards in his main deck.
No, we're calling this mono-red aggro, even though it does play a number of black cards or pseudo-black cards in the form of stuff like Scrap Heap, Scrounger, but Turtenwald is definitely further in on the black here.
Absolutely, and the most important differentiation is actually in this particular matchup, Heart of Kiran. The decision to play or not to play Heart of Kiran, quite the relevant difference in our top 8. For example, you see Owen here attacking with Heart of Kiran. The mono-red players, but also Hendricks, decided to not go for Heart of Kiran.
Well, Heart of Kiran right now getting busy, and Manuel Lenz already down to 15 thanks to that Goblin chain whirler trigger. Look at that, not just 2 chains here. He's got about 8 of them swinging around and around his head. And this has been the defining card of the tournament for me here, Simon. One of the defining cards of the format as well. Goblin chain whirler really here to stay.
Absolutely. This card, imagine if Owen was playing against the Lana Valve strategy.
Oh, yeah.
That would be disaster.
14.
Uncrop Crasher, look at this, a blast from the... Is that your phone ringing? Oh, it's mid-2017, wanting their 3-drop back because Uncrop Crasher is here as well, crashing this particular party. Owen Turtenwald down to 14 now.
It has all the stats you want. It doesn't have 1 toughness, it has 3 power. I still like Rune Raider a bit more, the Andrea Mengucci tech we saw.
Tech, yeah.
But let's see. It's, of course, even more important if you want to crew Heart of Kiran. And it's actually kind of critical that Owen follows up with a creature that can crew Heart of Kiran so that he can stay on offense.
Oh, and look at this. An on-flavor victory as well as Pianala jumps into the Heart of Kiran and away they go. 7 damage coming across for Lenz, who is under a huge amount of pressure. He's taking a real beating here.
And as you can see, he's basically forced into racing because he cannot block with his Scrap Heap Scrounger. He cannot block Goblin Chain Roller effectively. So that puts Owen Turtenwald at quite the advantage.
Got a fair bit of action going on in his hands, does the Austrian, but is he going to be able to leverage any of it? I mean, look at this, 4 drops and 5 drops when he's only got 3 lands on the battlefield. And, I mean, look at this, the Ether Hubs as well. He's going to run out of coloured sources eventually from then. A Canyon Slayer off the top's going to help him, but it's not... I mean, this is the price you pay, you know?
Yes, some thing that we've actually seen over and over again is that these lands that come into play tap, they are a real cost. And Manuel is paying that price right now. He does have a Braid. Actually, it's interesting that he chose not to abrade Heart of Kiran and go into a more defensive mode. He probably realizes that to beat Owen in this matchup, he has to stay as aggressive as possible.
Ether Hub, the play now for Turtenwald as well. We mentioned the fact that he does have quite a heavy black component to his deck, unlike Lenz, and Lenz is paying the price for that right now with that Tap Canyon Slayer, Unlicensed Disintegration. No permit required to destroy this Arncrop Crasher. Very much the cops turning up to the loud party here as he crashed into that one. And away goes the 3-2. Crew up that Heart of Kieran, and once again, Turtenwald not letting up, and the Austrian's got nothing to do other than to pack up his cards, and a very decisive victory there for the American Hall of Famer. Small smile plays around the corners of his mouth there because he's going to be happy to have picked that one up, Simon.
Yeah.
We are going to move across to our back table. Sounds like both players have been hit by successive mulligans here, Simon, with Hendricks mulligan to 6. And his opponent there, Wyatt Darby, on a mulligan to 5. So really sort of having to scrap with whatever they can piece together. But hey, look at this. Nice developed battlefields for both of them.
Absolutely. Doesn't look too bad if you ask me. And I've mentioned this before. It sometimes actually is an advantage. So your Hazrat can get active earlier.
But it is going to be enough there. Looks like Hendricks is going to steal that one from Wyatt Darby after, again, a bit of a scrappy start for both of these players, but Hendricks does come up with the goods. So we have one game going the way of Turtenwald, one game going the way of Thomas Hendriks. These guys locked up a top 8 appearance pretty early yesterday afternoon, Simon. I think they were able to draw into top 8.
I looked at Wyatt Darby's record. I believe he went 6-0 in draft and 6-1 in constructed. So he had the luxury of drawing 3 times, which means he just swept through this turn.
Yeah, easy game, easy life for Wyatt Darby. However, he is down a game against Thomas Hendriks. Bit of shuffle cam going on at the moment between these players. Maybe gives us a chance to talk about the format of the top 8 here, Simon. A little bit different to what we're used to because we are playing best of 5, and that has sideboard implications too.
Yes, but actually we are only sideboarding after game 2. So that way it's not 1 game pre-sideboard and then up to 4 games sideboard. That would, or we've tried that in the past, and then the games had too much of a sideboard influence. Now it's a pretty nice mix where you have 2 games. Where the players play with their main deck configuration, and then it goes to sideboarding.
So 2 games pre-board, 3 games post-board, or up to 3 games post-board, depending on how much of a scrub you are sitting against. Obviously some of the best players in the world are always going to make the way to the top 8. So if you can get it out to 5 games.
only got 1 sideboarded game.
Yeah. Always can't always get there. But right now we are going to have effectively another game 1 here with Hendricks and Turtenwald being up. Certainly, a top 8 that has crystallised the format for many. We've seen various flavours of red-based aggressive decks, but Goblin Chainwhirl are really the talk of the town, the prettiest girl of the dance here, because everyone's wanting to whirl those chains about right now.
Yes. When we were entering the constructed portion on day 2, there were still a lot of different decks, other decks in contention. Ultimately, the Chainwhirler decks rose to the top. They are fundamentally different. If you look at the mono-red versions, the versions with or without Womad Courier, and even some quote-unquote mono-red deck lists splashing for Raska's Contempt. I think that's definitely a much different version right there.
Well, can we, as these players shuffle up, get their sideboard, get their opening hands ready, can we talk about the power of the Goblin Chainwhirler and its specific role in the format? It's just a 3/3 first strike with a triggered ability. On paper, it doesn't seem like it's going to be a particularly oppressive card. Why are we seeing it in such great numbers?
I think it's because it is such a pillar of the format that warps the metagame just by existing. So every 1 toughness card that was constructed playable before Goblin Chainwhirler has to be re-evaluated. And that means Llanowar Elves, that means Glintsleeve Siphoner, that means Womad Courier, and there are a bunch more. Toolcraft Exemplar, for
Champion
example.
of Wits, yeah.
So suddenly Goblin Chainwhirler is creating a metagame. And apparently at this event, the pros decided that they would rather be on the Chainwhirler side than facing off against it.
If you can't beat them, join them. And that's certainly what our top 8 has done this week.
Kai Buddha just tweeted, and it was a discussion about green-black Constrictor. And that's certainly a deck you can play, but Kai said, look, you are aware that you're not playing Goblin Chainwhirler or Teferi. And not playing either of them might be a mistake in this standard format.
Certainly some enormously powerful cards joining us with the advent of Dominaria into the standard format. And, that looks set to continue. The set is one of the best we've seen in recent months, even in recent years, I would say. Looks like both players have kept, and we are going to get ready for game number 2 now between Owen Turtenwald and Manuel Lenz here. The Austrian taking a loss in game number 1. No shame in that, of course. He's playing against one of the best players in the world in Owen Turtenwald, a man who has really stamped his authority on competitive Magic in recent years and is really doing his best these days, Simon, to become the best ambassador for the game that he can be.
Manuel also on a mulligan. He just scryed, and his first land didn't allow him to cast Wyatt Courier.
Well, Canyon Slough for both players now, but we are going to see an Earthshaker Kenra entering the battlefield, tapped and attacking. Look at that rocket-powered turbo slug. In it comes. Back over to Turtenwald now. We can see what's going on in his hand on the screen there. Looks like he's got a decent mix and a curve that goes all the way up to Glorybringer here.
Yeah, more importantly, he has a Goblin Chain Roller. He's lacking lands, though. You see the Ether Hub is his second land. He needs to draw lands, at least one more red source, of course, to cast the Goblin Chain Roller.
Here's Caries, the Skyship Captain. Obviously a nice aggressive beater, a 2-drop that effectively attacks for 3. Very difficult to block or make any sort of meaningful battlefield interaction with. But Earthshaker Kenra is going to pile on the pressure here. The second one coming for Manuel Lenz, keeping Caries out of the action. And all of a sudden, Turtenwald's on 14.
He top deck a mountain, though.
Ooh. Oh, no. Oh, no. Ladies and gentlemen, ready yourself for some utter carnage, because Manuel Lenz is playing 2/2-1s in the face of Whirly Dubs now, and this is not going to be pretty for the Austrian player. Look, and he knew what was coming as well, Simon Gertzen. Look at that. It's not even a 2-for-1.
No, it's a 3-for-1.
So huge stuff here from Owen Turtenwald as he continues to press his advantage. That mountain, a clutch draw off the top, and Lenz doesn't have the third land. Looks like Owen Turtenwald is going to romp and stomp here, because Lenz just has nothing to say about this. An attack for 6. Oh, no, and a lightning strike's going to stem the bleeding a little bit here, Simon.
Yeah, now he's trying to play more of that control role, but the question is if he has already lost too much momentum here.
Yeah, typically to play control, you need a lot of lands on the battlefield, and Lenz certainly doesn't have that. Here's a Soulscar Mage now for Turtenwald. He's going to follow it up with another 2-drop in the form of Heart of Kieran.
Yeah, maybe not the relief that Manuel was looking for.
Finds a mountain off the top. Demonstrated himself to be a person of great taste and refinement with his basic land choice, as indeed has Owen Turtenwald. Rocking those Kaladesh basics by the look of things.
Here you can see exactly the difference between the 2 Goblin Chain Rollers in each of their lists. Owen Turtenwald killed 2 2-drops with Goblin Chain Roller. Manuel Lenz is looking at Goblin Chain Roller in his hand, and it would not have that effect on Owen's battlefield. He has only 2 and 3 toughness creatures there.
Around about a year ago, when we were in Kyoto for Pro Tour Arrow Devastation, we had these red decks running rampant all over the battlefield there, and Soulscar Mage was kind of the backup, right, to many of the other 1-drops, in particular Wyatt Courier. And in today's standard format, we're seeing it favoured again because of the Chain Whirler and the 1 damage that's flying around there. In addition to, of course, the combo that we saw last round with Goblin, Chain Whirler, and Soulscar Mage putting -1/-1 counters. Right now, however, we do have an Uncrop Crasher coming across once again. Manuel Lenz kicking it old school with the 3-2. Back to Turtenwald now, who certainly is, continues to find the lands that he needs, Simon. He's curving out very nicely.
He drew a 4th land, so now Chandra is active. And that might already be the nail in the coffin. Manuel was very far behind already.
Now, the classic play with Chandra traditionally has been onto a battlefield that your opponent's contesting is to come down, Flame Slash, remove an opposing creature, and then defend Chandra on 1 loyalty. That's not such a great line anymore.
No, players have come to really appreciate the +2 mana ability, and 2 free mana on a turn is huge. You usually need 2 cards and 2 turns for that, for those land drops to happen. And in this particular case, Owen even ramped out Scrapheap Scoundrel to crew Heart of Kieran.
So huge stuff here from Owen Turtenwald, who takes out another game. Easy does it, he says. Look at that, simple as anything. And we are going to be able to head over to our back table now and see how things go between Hendricks and Wyatt Darby. Turtenwald never really looked in any to be in too much trouble there, Simon. It was a very convincing performance from him.
Absolutely.
We are going to take a break, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to come back, of course, and check in with Thomas Hendriks and Wyatt Darby. You're not going to want to miss a minute of all the action here from Richmond, Virginia. We'll see you back at Pro Tour Dominaria in just a few moments.
So Magic the Gathering Arena We chose that word arena very particularly because an arena is a place where people gather, where people come to compete, where people come to spectate and cheer on their favorites. It really is a place where the whole community can come together and experience the very best of what Magic has to offer.
To the feature match area here at Pro Tour Dominaria. Great pleasure to have you with us. My name is Riley, joined by Simon Gertzen, the Pro Tour champion. We're going to jump right into our next match between between Wyatt Darby and look at that, what's that off the starboard bow? It's the Flying Dutchman, Thomas Hendriks. These guys have already squared away game number 1, going in favour of Thomas Hendriks there. And we have something very different here, or at least a little bit different, in the hands of Wyatt Darby.
Wyatt Darby is playing 24 Mountains, and that was the first thing that Thomas Hendriks told me when I asked him about his matchup. And Thomas said, my opponent is not messing around.
No.
This is as aggressive as it gets, perfect mana base, no tapped lands on turn 2, 3, 4, anything disrupting the curve.
Darby is all business. He's not here to make friends. He's got enough of them, Simon. He's got enough of them. And if you've read his top 8 player profile, you'll know that they refer to him as the generic Michael Mages. So, yeah, the Michael Mages from the bargain bin there. Wyatt Darby has done very well to make it all the way to the top 8 of this particular Pro Tour. And I tell you what, his mana base and his very streamlined aggressive deck is putting him in a great position against decks like Red-Black Aggro, which do have to pay a real cost with tapped lands and awkward draws sometimes.
Yes, and at the same time, Thomas's deck is actually still quite similar to Darby's because he's also playing those uncrop crashers and has quite a lot of removal available to him.
We have seen Red-Black Aggro as the premier archetype of this weekend. However, there's a lot of movement, a lot of moving pieces within the individual list. It's difficult to nail down a stock 75. And even between, teammates, right? There were people favouring certain cards over. The core of the deck is largely similar, Simon, but there's a little bit of play in between individual card choices here.
Yes. Do you play black sources? How many of them? Do you want to support just a Scrappy Scrounger activation or more, going up to Vraska's Contempt, for example? And then a big question, I think, do you play Heart of Kiran, and how many 4-drops do you play? The decision to play Bowman Courier, at least from the data that I've looked at, seems to have been absolutely correct. So even though Chainwalker was everywhere, it was still rewarded to play the powerful 1-drop.
Yeah, we've seen the Postie do a lot of work on his rounds throughout the weeks and months of this standard format. And again, look at that. Off he goes on his little motorbike. And now we have the Scrape Heap Scrounger joining them. That Lightning Strike took care of Caries A very unorthodox position for Thomas Hendriks' graveyard, but hey, he doesn't play by anyone's rules. Doesn't even play by his own rules, Simon. And Hendricks curving the 1 into 2 there on turn number 3. We'll see what Darby's answer for it is. Got a range of options in hand, as you can see. A couple of Abrades, Hazrat the Fervent and Soulscar Mage all hanging out in there. What are you going for here, Simon? Hazrat's not doing too much right now.
No, you could play Hazrat and then try to empty your hand next turn. Yeah, that's what Darby's going for. I like that better than trying to play removal spells here, because you don't really have the targets you're looking for. You're winning the race. Scrounger can't block. You don't want to kill the Bowman Career with 1 card under it. So I like Darby's line here.
And Abrade's not doing very much against Scrap Heap Scrounger. We've seen this card again, one of the archetypical cards of this standard format. Scrounger is it punishes anyone that's not playing exile effects, because that one just keeps coming back. Encore performances, Simon. The curtain never closes.
It does require you to have black sources. That's the one price you pay.
Goblin Chainwhirler now, not having any effect on the battlefield at least, but it is going to ping Darby down another point of damage here. 5-4 and a 3-2 on his side, but he's got 4 cards in hand. That's an issue when it comes to old Hazrat the Fervent.
And that's a much juicier target for an Abrade, because it stops Uncop Crasher from attacking. At least you would have to exert it. But now the question is Darby actually able to empty his hand? He had 2 Abrades and a Soulscar Mage, so if you drew a spell, I don't think his mana is going to work out.
No, he's drawn a Lightning Strike for the turn, which is going to make it tricky for him to dump out his hand here. I don't think there's any way in which he's going to be able to attack with Hazrat the Fervent this turn.
I agree.
So, Goblin Chainwhirler down, and we are going to see the Uncrop Crash getting tapping to the left, Wyatt Darby, an unorthodox choice from him today. And that's going to continue to put pressure on Hendricks' life total here. This guy has been around for quite a while. Mate, he's really broken into the European Pro Circuit after appearing on the Dutch national Magic team at the World Cup in 2013. And since then, he's cut his hair and really honed down on what he wanted to do. And another top 8 for him is richly deserved.
Called one of Dutch's finest by Frank Carson. So.
And he knows what's up. I mean, that's not just, a shooting from the hip from Frank Carson. He's run the numbers. There's a way, there's a quantitative analysis behind that statement.
On current and former Dutch professional Magic players.
Uncrop Crasher now for the Dutchman. And we're going to see the mailbag of the Bomat Courier continuing to expand. Another Abrade here for Darby. A tidy turn for him, using his mana very efficiently.
Yes, and I think Thomas was expecting something like this. He didn't have to exert because Hazrat was not going to block there, but he's losing the race quite significantly. Darby is going to empty his hand here, and he's threatening an attack for 8 plus a Lightning Strike. That's 11.
So that is enough to wrap things up very convincingly here once again, and Darby now, well, splits the first 2 games between him and Hendricks. Now, Simon, this means that both of our tables have rounded out their second games, and heading into game number 3, this is where sideboards come into play. We are going to head over and have a look at what's going on between Turtenwald and Manuel Lenz. But before we get underway with their next game, we are going to have a look at their sideboards and what was happening with them. So let's check in now and see what Owen Turtenwald's got to work with. Simon, what immediately are you looking at in this matchup here?
Magma Spray and Chandra's Defeat, more cheap ways of interacting with Scrap Heap Scroungers, with red creatures and Chandras. I also like Rekindling Phoenix as a super good way to somehow catch up, because what is really difficult is to find creatures that are happy blocking. Bormid Courier and, for example, Uncrop Crasher, these are the creatures that really want to attack. Oftentimes that's the case for Hazard as well, but you want to be able to play a slower game if your draw allows it.
And you mentioned that Magma Spray is going to be a key card and a key piece of interaction, but against Scrap Heap Scrounger, as you mentioned, it is particularly critical.
It is the answer you want to see against Scrap Heap Scrounger, or maybe a first striking Chain Roller, but as we've seen, a 3 toughness Chain Roller is relatively easy to get rid of.
And a Magma Spray is going to get rid of the 3-2. No questions asked, and exile it for good. A very important piece of removal there. We'll move on now and have a look at what Manuel Lenz, the Austrian, has to work with here. And his sideboard, I mean, well, look, we've got a little bit of overlap here, but he's got some spicy options.
Yes, I do absolutely like the Chandra's Defeat and the Magma Spray in there as well. I don't quite understand what all of these cards are meant for. For example, Scree the Immortal I haven't seen anywhere else. Fight with Fire I assume is meant for Lyra and nothing else. And then release the Gremlins. This is an interesting question. Do you want to bring this in against a deck that is playing Bormert Courier, Heart of Kirin, and Scrapheap Scrounger? Or is this for even more artifact-heavy decks?
We've seen Angrath the Flame Chain do work in the feature match area already this morning, Simon. Have you got your eye on that card as perhaps something of a mirror breaker going big?
Yeah, maybe, but I wouldn't call it a key piece of this matchup. It is competing with a lot of powerful cards on 5, and the effect is not always all that backbreaking.
We are going to see if we can get a sneaky look at how these players ended up deciding to sideboard, but my understanding is that they are ready to go with game number 3. So let's check in with Turtenwald and Lenz again. Turtenwald is on a 2-0 lead, so certainly the ball in his court here, and if he can close out this single game, he's going to the semi-finals. The Hall of Famer here. Cool, calm, collected. Look at him, ready to go. And of course, his opponent, Manuel Lenz, going to be on the play here. And, well, an awkward hand for Turtenwald here. 4 lands, 3 spells, and none of which really do anything too early. But a Caries Ev's a nice one to follow up that Soulscar Mage.
Yeah, actually turning his hand into quite the nice curve here.
And Lenz, on the other hand, he's got Mountains for Days in addition to Goblin Chain Whirler. And again, this interaction we've seen from both players, Chandra's defeat, very important in what is a red mirror.
Absolutely. And what's going to be the most interesting here is which creatures or which permanents these players choose to aim their removal at.
Caries Ev, the Sky Ship Captain, is going to eat and abrade here. So she's not going to get to plunder and pillage just yet. And Lenz now almost certainly going to just deploy a 3-3 here, making good use of his mana and getting on the battlefield.
So we've seen that Caries Ev is worth a removal spell. I would assume that Goblin Chain Roller is as well, at least if you're trying to be aggressive on the ground. There are certainly situations where things go to the air and you can ignore a Goblin Chain Roller.
Owen Turtenwald's hand continues to improve with a Chandra Torch of Defiance joining the ranks, in addition to a Chandra's defeat and a couple of lands. So he is going to have an answer to the Goblin Chain Whirler, that's right, but a pretty quiet turn from Turtenwald this time around.
And it does make you a bit unhappy to spend a Chandra's defeat, I think. That's such a good answer also to later game threats that you would rather have an Abrade or Lightning Strike at that stage.
Well, anyway you slice it, Chain Whirler down, and now it's back to Lenz to find some more action. He does have a second Chain Whirler in hand. And Turtenwald's deck very cleverly built to minimize the impact of the 3-3, but right now it is instead a Scrapheap Scrounger.
By the way, if Manuel had played a Hazrat here, the combination of Soulscar Mage and Chandra's defeat would have been able to take it down.
Putting -1/-1 counters on an indestructible creature, a great way to do that. Here is Chandra, the Torch of Defiance, another key card in this standard metagame. Also seeing some play in Modern, in the old red-green Ponza decks.
Owen only with the +1 ability to deal 2 to Lenz, so doesn't have use for double red. Decides against trying to kill the Scrounger here.
No, a Flame Slash on the Scrounger wouldn't achieve too much in the face of an oncoming Goblin Chain Whirler, which we know the Austrian is sandbagging right now. And look at that poker face on Owen Turtenwald.
Sure.
And we're going to see Lenz now remove the Soulscar Mage, an unfettered attack for the Scrapheap Scrounger across at Chandra here.
I'm a bit surprised at that Abrade. I thought the Soulscar Mage was not really contributing too much to the action.
Oh dear, and a huge flavor victory here for Manuel Lenz, not only destroying Chandra with this 1 mana removal spell, also
16.
enabling a bit of a rummage here for Lenz. And now we have Scrapheap Scrounger getting across, in addition to the 1 point of damage from the Goblin Chain Whirler, and all of a sudden, Lenz is in the driving seat.
Yep, that went downhill quite quickly. Suddenly, Manuel has used his mana more effectively, and look.
A Glory Bringer now, the big Crocodragon coming across, removing the Chain Whirler from play, and we'll see what Lenz's response to it is. He does have a Glory Bringer of his own here.
That would be good at racing this situation.
But of course, the Glory Bringer can't exert itself to kill other dragons. It's got a fierce loyalty to its tribe, Simon. But nonetheless, it's going to hustle and bustle for a fair stack of damage. And Turtenwald now left with a tap 4/4. He's all dressed up and nowhere to go. What's in his hand?
Pioneer and lands, that's not a lot to work with.
Not in the face of this, well, effectively one-turn clock if Lenz can back it up with any kind of draw here. P&LR on defense now. What can Lenz find? Didn't get a good look at that, playing the card pretty close to his chest, figuratively at least, not literally here. And what is he up to? Hits the tank here, Simon.
He has a black source available with that ether hub, so Scrappy Scrounger also just got a lot more scary.
Let's see what he's up to. Owen Turtenwald, quite a formidable opponent to try to overcome here, as we mentioned. Pro Tour Hall of Famer, 5th Pro Tour top 8 appearance for him as well. Someone who has played the game for a long time. And now we're going to see an exert of the Glorybringer removing P&LR. And I mean, do we have to chump block the Glorybringer here, Simon?
I think that would probably be a good use of your resources, but it really depends what Owen thinks of how he can still win this game. Because he's only holding an ether hub, he doesn't have anything, so now he has to do the math of what do I need to draw to survive this. Maybe his only out is drawing another Pia, and then he needs to attack with that Thopter token, for example.
So the Thopter jumps in the way of the Glorybringer. Glory be not today, he says. And the Scrap Heap Scrounger gets across for 3. Turtenwald down to 5. Lenz empties his hand. Back to Turtenwald. Scrap Heap Scrounger, the draw. Not going to be enough. Not a great defensive creature here, Simon.
But he's not dead to Lenz's attack next turn, because Lenz decided to exert his Glorybringer. I think this is not over.
So Lenz untaps his Scrap Heap Scrounger. Look at this, nice symmetry on the battlefield between these two players at the moment. In comes the Scrap Heap Scrounger. Turtenwald cannot block, down to 2. And Lenz with the Soulscar Mage.
But that leaves him dead.
So now an attack with the Glorybringer, and an exert is enough to knock that Soulscar Mage out of contention. And Owen Turtenwald hanging on by his fingernails there, Simon. On 2 life, manages to take it out. A clean sweep for the Hall of Famer, 3-0.
I don't think he was supposed to win that game.
I don't think he was either.
But he managed to do it.
Well, if there's anyone who can do that sort of thing, it is the O-Rat, and he continues his onslaught of this top 8 into the semi-finals. And we are going to have a look across back now at our second quarterfinal between Thomas Hendriks and Wyatt Darby. Of course, they split the first 2 games. That means that we are heading into sideboards right now, and we can have a look what the Flying Dutchman Thomas Hendriks is working with for his sideboard. Once again, a lot of the usual suspects appearing here. Chandra's Defeat, Magma Spray, but other options as well. Everything from Hour of Glory to Khan Sign of Urza here, Simon.
Yeah, players have really... let's say, been creative in finding sideboard cards. I like Hour of Glory. That's really a cool technology because it allows you to have something that's like Restless Contempt, but it only costs you a single black mana. So that's definitely cool. We might also see, even your Deadlands, if you're boarding in more expensive cards, like that Glorybringer, and you want to slow down the game anywhere, even your Deadlands is a nice way to cast your black spells and also acts as a removal spell.
I mean, the question here is why wouldn't you just play Vraska's Contempt? Because we're not casting Hour of Glory expecting to, use the rider about exiling a god here, but it's about the mana cost.
It's about the mana cost because you are only playing a few black sources in these decks, often only a single swamp and then dual lands. I actually found it really interesting that there are players, or that there were players at this tournament that went for more pure black sources. So they made their chain rollers a bit worse, but they made their overall access to removal and sideboarding options better.
Yeah, especially with cards like Vraska's Contempt. Most of the time better than something like Hour of Glory. But hey, needs must, and if you want to get that Chain Whirler out on turn number 3, well, that's the way to do it. We move over now and have a look at Wyatt Darby's sideboard, and with, look at that, only 1 line required, Simon. We don't even need that second line of real estate there to have a look at what he's working with. Mono red aggro in the very purest sense. 24 mountains, the mana base of kings, Simon. And this is what he's working with post-board.
I think that's a really good sideboard for the matchup he's facing. I like Chandra's Defeat for obvious reasons. I like Chandra and Glorybringer to just go 1 step slower but more powerful. And also either Sphere Harvester is well positioned to fight against black-red vehicles. He might actually bring in a ton of cards here, maybe even cut a few cards that are bad against Chainwall, and maybe that has been his recipe for success all weekend.
We'll see exactly what Darby wants to do. We'll have that sideboard plan for you as soon as it comes off the stove. Let's get underway, however, with our third game in this second quarterfinal. On the back table, it is Thomas Hendriks playing off against Wyatt Darby here. This isn't Hendricks' first rodeo. He's been around at the Pro Tour. He came 7th at a previous Pro Tour there, Simon. However, Darby is making his debut at the highest level here. We saw Hendricks at Pro Tour Dragons of Tarkia, where he finished 7th back in Brussels. And now, a slower start here for these players as Caries comes down on turn number 2. I think typically we see all the 1-drops taken out.
Yeah, and Thomas not exposing his Scrap Heap Scourger to Magma Spray. Nice little detail to not give Darby maybe the on-curve play that he would have available here.
But Darby without a turn 2 play of his own. But we can see he's holding up Lightning Strike in addition to Chandra's defeat here. So he's got some nice interactive options, and we do see Lightning Strike. I think that's the second time it's hit a Karizev this game, or at least during these feature matches here, Simon. I was told that Lightning never struck twice, but, well, it seems I've been misinformed here.
Yeah, and I have to correct myself. Darby is the one player that does not have Magma Spray.
Oh,
so he is only on 3 Chandra's defeat instead.
Chandra's defeat, certainly a very useful card against, well, nearly all of Hendricks' deck. I'll tell you one card that's no good against, Simon. That's the old Scrap Heap Scrounge Arena, and that's what he's got to deal with right now.
And we will also see how good this Ether Sphere Harvester really is. I think from the stats perspective, it's really good, but maybe you should first have a creature in play before you try to deploy your vehicle.
The thing is, if he can attack with it once, if he plays a single creature, crews and attacks, gains life, that's a 6-point life swing. That is no joke.
It's no joke, really, but in game 1, I would completely agree. In game 2, things get a little bit more slower and a bit more control-y. So it's a little bit less about just these life total swings and more about who can have the lasting threat on the battlefield. And in that regard, I like, for example, Rekindling Phoenix or Glorybringer more.
All right, that does make sense. I mean, we tend to look at this as, you know, post-board, things get bigger. There's more interaction brought in. The games naturally kind of slow down because the threats become larger. The interaction becomes more efficient and more targeted. For example, Chandra's defeat. And so as a result, yeah, I see what you're saying. The lifelink 3/5 isn't going to be as high impact.
Exactly. And if you look at Thomas's hand, by the way, he has the Eldest Reborn, and he just drew Hour of Glory, I believe.
So he is really going a lot slower than we've seen here. And we're going to see an Hour of Glory get rid of that Phoenix once and for all. He is not looking to muck around with that the little Alski there. Get it out of town, he says. And I don't think Hedwig's going to be returning from this postal journey here. We'll see now what Wyatt Darby's next move is. He does have a full 5 cards in hand, one of which is a Glorybringer.
Glorybringer was pivotal for Owen's win in game 3 there. A little bit surprising, actually. The math just worked out exactly in his favor.
Yeah, Turtenwald there, quite a stunning recovery. All of a sudden, he seemed to be under a lot of pressure, but just completely flipped the script and managed to take it down. And Andreas Lenz walks, well, look like George Michael from Arrested Development out of the feature match area.
And now you see why Wyatt is thinking for so long. You want to deploy Glorybringer on curve, but that would once again miss the opportunity to crew the Harvester, so instead you see him spend 1 mana instead of 5.
It's not often that you see a Glorybringer issued instead for a Soulscar Mage to make an appearance, but that's the way that Wyatt Darby is going to play out this one, and he buffers his life total up to 23. Ordinarily, you'd think fantastic, but where's now going to see Hendricks slam an Eldest Reborn and start to really get some value?
Yeah, but Darby can actually be happy here with his choice, very happy with his choice.
Sure, absolutely.
Imagine the alternative, just having to sacrifice Glorybringer on that battlefield.
For basically no value as well. This does mean that Darby is going to be able to slam that dragon into play should he so choose, and he hasn't been too roughly dealt with by the Eldest Reborn. This card has been great in so many matchups throughout the weekend. I know I spoke to some players who were playing it in their board as a tool against control decks where, generally speaking, the only target or the only permanent they can sacrifice to this is a Teferi.
At least the pure blue-white control decks, yes.
Here is Glorybringer now for Wyatt Darby, the 4/4 hasty dragon, going to get some work done. And what are your thoughts on an exert trigger pointed at that Scrap Heap Scrounger?
Absolutely not. I mean, you're missing 4 damage just to put a creature in the graveyard that is bound to come back.
Not even thinking about it, you can see there Caries in the graveyard, ready to power that 3/2 back into play.
Both players a bit flooded here.
Yeah, not drawing too well. Well, I spoke too soon because Thomas Hendriks has just drawn a Rekindling Phoenix, and that is a perfect draw here as he's able to deploy it this turn should he choose.
And we talked about that at the desk. The reason why Rekindling Phoenix is so good is that it puts a lot of pressure on the opponent, but it plays defense so well.
So next turn as well, Hendricks is going to get the best creature out of either graveyard, or indeed Planeswalker, should we see one get in there. Unlikely at this stage, but the Eldest Reborn, a very good card on the face of it. You know, you sacrifice a creature, you discard a card, and then you get a creature back. And then it's even better, Simon, when you actually read what the card does, and you realise you can take a creature or Planeswalker out of any graveyard.
It's always a nice surprise when a card does more than you think it does.
Yeah, more than you bargained for, that's right, yeah. You go and buy a sports car, and then all of a sudden they hand you the sunglasses and the jacket, and you're like, oh, there's a nice little bonus there. Didn't realise it was going to come with that one. Let's see what Darby's up to, because he's really facing quite a difficult knot to untie here. Eldest Reborn popping off next turn. We've got the climax of this particular story, Act 3. And a 4/3 as well, ready to hustle and bustle. We can indeed reveal to you the sideboarding plans of these players. Let's kick things off with Thomas Hendriks. Simon, I can tell you now that he has taken all of his Bomat Couriers out and 2 of his Arncrop Crashes. Unsurprising to see the 1 toughness creature Bomat Courier coming out in the face of opposing Chain Whirlers.
Yes, and Arncrop Crasher is just not very good in this kind of matchup.
Doesn't do a whole lot, that's very true. And in its place, we have instead 2 Chandra's Defeat, a Glorybringer, Eldest Reborn, Hour of Glory, and Ifnir Deadlands coming in for Hendriks.
He did bring in the extra land. I really like that decision.
Especially when we bring in 5 drops like Glorybringer and the Eldest Reborn. Always good to have that extra mana source to power them out. We'll get to Darby's sideboard in just a second here, Simon. He's currently in the tank, but looks like he's going to finally make some attacks. Aethersphere Harvester, I think, all out of energy at this stage. And we have now the Glorybringer knocking that Phoenix out of the sky. Reverts to egg mode here.
Wyatt took a long time contemplating that decision, and I think that was really important, because the question whether to exert Glorybringer or not and how to exactly plan your turns ahead is really important.
Hendricks down to 3 now. Looks like he's going to step away from the table, consult with the judge on some question or other. Gives us an opportunity now to talk about Wyatt Darby's sideboard plans. He stays hydrated. So important to stay hydrated, Simon. Let's talk about what Darby is up to. He's taken out 3 copies of Shock, 3 copies of Bomat Courier, and again those Arncrop Crashes have hit the bench there. And instead of that, we've got 3 Chandra's Defeats, 3 Glorybringers, and 2 Aethersphere Harvesters. Very clean 8 for 8 swap here, Simon, and you're nodding your head in approval.
Very clean, I like it. Taking out the worst removal, the worst creatures, and the 3 couriers. He only has 3 of them. Doesn't bring in Chandra Torch of Defiance, though.
So we can reveal to you what's going on here with the Thomas Hendriks judge call there. He was asking a question to do with the Eldest Reborn and the exact timing of the way that those triggers pop off. If you can kill a creature in response to the reanimate trigger, you can indeed do that. And that means that Chandra's Defeat is going to be able to remove the Glorybringer and then bring it back on the side of Thomas Hendriks. And that's a huge swing here for the judge.
Absolutely. That Glorybringer switching sides could be very problematic for Darby. How much damage does he have? 11, and Darby is on 14. Darby is threatening lethal with both of his creatures, so Hendricks has to be really careful here.
And this isn't an act of treason. This Glorybringer has switched sides for good.
Oh, it is an act of treason.
It's a campaign of treason here, because it's sticking around for a long time. This isn't a one-shot effect. That Eldest Reborn is sticking around for a long time here, and it's a dragon as well, so certainly an on-flavor way to play this card. But you are able to respond to the triggered abilities from Sagas, and that's what Hendricks was attempting to do there. And it's always important to have those gameplay questions resolved by a judge in these situations. That's why our team of judges is standing on by both gameplay judges and flavor judges in the feature match area. The flavor judges tend to keep a little bit quieter, though.
Darby is stopping Hendricks from attacking here because he's holding Chandra's Defeat as well.
May I look at my sideboard?
So Darby now also asking a question of a judge. Can you look at his sideboard there?
I'm pretty sure it is, but
Yeah, I'll put my hand over here, so it's
yeah, I mean, it's gonna be pretty hard for you to switch those around.
And you can see, but it's able chat there. Hendricks saying it's going to be pretty hard for you to switch those around. You've got 2 cards in hand. Oh, yeah, all of a sudden. Oh, you've got 15. Go to discard? Yeah, easy. But no, you are allowed, of course, to consult with your see your sideboard during a match. My understanding is you're not allowed to look at notes during a game, although you can refer to notes that you've made between, like while sideboarding and shuffling.
Yes, you can't refer to those notes, for example, you brought from home.
Yeah, you can make notes during a game and look at them, of course, but you can't sort of, print off the latest Reduke article and read it in the middle of a match here. Rekindling Phoenix, and followed up by a Chandra's defeat. So Darby keeping his Snood above the water here as we see Egg Mode come in once again, and Hendricks under attack. And it's enough here for Darby.
Really sweet play by Darby.
Look at him go.
Darby realized that killing Glorybringer before combat was actually not in his best interest. What he tried to do was to bait Hendricks into attacking, being aggressive, and then he knew that if he draws anything to crew the Harvester, he has the Chandra's defeat to take the Phoenix out of the sky.
So, Darby there, trusting that the top of his deck's going to treat him nicely, and I tell you what, a very good result for him because he certainly played, giving himself the best percentage to win. And Simon, this is something we see at the Pro Tour, I'd say, more often than anywhere else on the professional Magic circuit. We see players making unintuitive, counterintuitive plays even, knowing that that is their best path to victory. And for a less experienced player, it's not often obvious what they're up to.
Yes, and actually we saw basically the same thing that also allowed Owen to win the game, really understanding this racing situation, especially how Glorybringer and the Exert trigger influences things.
And there are players, who are able to visualize multiple timelines in one situation where they're able to sort of go, oh, if X then Y, but if Y then Z, and so on. And they're imagining several different situations all happening simultaneously and figuring out which line is going to be the best one.
Traversing this decision tree far into the future, including all the randomness and unknown information, that is actually what competitive card gaming is all about.
So we do have Wyatt Darby taking a quick bio break here. Thomas Hendriks sitting pretty, looking to get himself sorted out for the next game. He is, of course, down at the moment, 2-1. Simon, and that means that right now what it's all about for Hendricks is shaping up, squaring up, getting himself in that zone, psychologically speaking, to do his best, to play his best Magic. You've been in very high pressure situations, Simon. You've got a Pro Tour trophy at home on your mantelpiece, and maybe you can talk to us a little bit about the psychology of the feature match era at times like this.
Well, the thing is, Thomas is one of our feature match competitors, our top 8 competitors, that is quite used to these lights. So I think for him, it's really just not business as usual. He knows it's a really important game for his career, but he has to focus on the next game. The circumstances surrounding that game are not that relevant. I'm a little bit more concerned for some of our less experienced players in the top 8, because this is something where maybe you've somehow been in the feature match area 2-3 times on Saturday or Friday, but it's a lot more quiet, you know.
Whole new ballgame.
There are sometimes only 2 players playing, a lot of cameras on you, a lot of lights on you, a lot of judges surrounding you. Many reasons to become nervous.
Hendricks also taking the opportunity to answer a call of nature as well here. So we do have a little bit of a break now in the coverage of our Pro Tour quarterfinals. You're watching live coverage from Richmond, Virginia in the United States, and you're in the booth with me, Riley Knight, and joining me, my good friend and colleague Simon Gertzen, who, as I mentioned, is a Pro Tour champion. He asks others to remind other people of that because, he likes to have at least a veneer of
thanks,
modesty,
Riley.
Simon. I want to come back to what we're talking about here with these decks, right? We can have a look at exactly what's going on with both the decks of Hendricks here and Wyatt Darby. Let's talk about Hendricks' list here. We've got it laid out very neatly for you for your viewing pleasure, ladies and gentlemen. And Simon, this list, or this particular take on this archetype here, has really put its best foot forward throughout the weekend.
Yes, and this is a list which does not play Heart of Kiran. That is usually what you would see in the bottom left corner, and usually 3 or 4 copies of the Heart. On the other hand, still very, very powerful cards. I have to say, if you're playing red, you're playing Goblin Chainroller. There's no way around it, and you always play 4 of them. 4 Rekindling Phoenix is a little bit more controversial, I would say, because it's not that obvious that this is the better choice than Hazrat or Chandra Torch of Defiance.
Well, this is what I wanted to talk to. There's such an embarrassment of riches at the 4-drop slot here between Phoenix, between Hazrat, and of course between Chandra, that the exact numbers there are always a little bit difficult. I mean, the traditional, the more orthodox approach to it has been easy peasy, slam dunk, 4 copies of Hazrat, but as we see the curves of these red decks get higher and higher, you can't always rely on Hazrat attacking on turn 4.
Yeah, and also the 2-2 split between Hazrat and Chandra shows you that there is no easy answer. It's not like Phoenix is the best of the 3 and then there is one clear second best, because then you would see 0 copies of the other. But they do, they serve such a different purpose. And like you said, they are not as reliable in all situations that this split looks correct. On the other hand, I mean, Hendricks is playing a lot of 2-offs, and that seems a bit weird to me. Like, why? Okay, I guess the Lightning Strike is supported by an Abrade, so maybe that's the answer, that you're actually adding up cards that are very similar, and that way you're getting a little bit of redundancy.
Getting that critical mass of cards that you need. We do see, of course, that Hendricks has got the black splash, not only for Scrap Heap, Scrounger, and Unlicensed Disintegration, but a number of cards in the sideboard. Unlike him, however, Wyatt Darby has gone for a very clear, clean-cut mana base, 24 mountains, no black cards to be seen anywhere in his 75.
Yeah, it is kind of beautiful. It is really the red deck of the format, and then you're back to playing 4 Hazards. I think this is actually kind of interesting how, even though there are these Earthshaker Kenras that you can punish, and of course Bombard Couriers that you can punish with Goblin Chainroller, the black-red decks are still kind of afraid of playing against this deck, because just a turn 4 Hazard can be so scary.
And we see here Hazrat prioritized over Rekindling Phoenix once again, Simon, in the 4 copies of Hazrat, 2 copies of Rekindling Phoenix, or 3 copies, I should say. You can see them split there across those columns very sneakily. But the reason for that, I would say, is that the curve of this deck is a fair bit lower.
Yeah, it's actually quite a bit lower. You see 4 Abrade, that's the respect that Darby has for Heart of Kiran.
But this card's just so good.
Of course.
This card's just so good. Abrade is seeing play all the way up into Legacy because it has something that professional or very skilled Magic players really value so highly in any card, Simon, in that it is so flexible.
Yeah, and both of these effects are very constructed playable. Killing a creature, 3 damage is enough for very important cards in the metagame. And this is an artifact standard format. We see a lot of artifacts being very, very relevant. And of course, vehicles, I think, one of the strongest card types of recent history.
I think what the important thing that Abrade does is it opens up a sideboard effect to the main deck. You're never playing a Shatter in your main deck. You're never playing Destroy Target Artifact as the only mode of a particular card. But the fact that it is so very rarely dead in a creature-based metagame like we have right now means that the destroying an artifact is just upside. It's just gravy. And we see that played over Lightning Strike, given that people would rather have that flexibility rather than be able to point 3 damage at the face.
And that is actually great observation. The pointing 3 damage to the face is not relevant in that many matchups as you might maybe think, because these decks have a lot of reach, they have a lot of late game potential. So we're kind of moving away from the all-in red decks that deal 12, 13 points of damage with their creatures and then just hope to rip burn spells. This kind of play pattern has really changed over the last few years.
Yeah, as we've seen removal spells occupy sort of little niches that are less sort of suited for that kind of play style. Critically as well, though, Abrade, I like the tension built into the card, because while it's so good and so flexible against the creature-based decks, the vehicle decks, whatever else, it is a real stinker against control, because Normally a card like Lightning Strike, well, you just point at their face, you point at the scone and you roast them and toast them. But in this situation, it is another card that is blanked by hard control decks.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why these control decks exist. They blank all your abrades, they blank your unlicensed disintegrations, and they make your Goblin Chamber a lot less scary.
Yeah, 3 mana, 3/3. Effectively, the first strike doesn't even matter. So I like the tension sort of built into this standard format. Goblin Chainwhirl is certainly dominating it at the moment, Simon. But I mean, I'm very interested to see. We've got a GP coming up next week in Copenhagen. We've got plenty of top-level play around the world in the coming weeks and months, and I'm really interested to see how pros are going to tackle it.
Yeah. I don't know when Thomas Hendriks' flight is back to Europe, but he might actually come visit us in Copenhagen as well.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. It's going to be a tight one. It's going to be a tight one. I'm spending one night in my own bed next week and then off to Copenhagen for coverage of the next GP. We certainly hope you're going to be able to join us there for all of the Premier Play coverage throughout the following weeks, months, and indeed years, because it is a great pleasure to have you watching, of course, wherever you are around the world. You're very welcome to this live stream of coverage of Pro Tour Dominaria. We have seen Dominaria draft this weekend, Simon. We've seen a whole bunch of standard play, and this format continues to... develop at a slower pace now that we have a better idea of where the format is at, but it's certainly by no means a finished product. We are going to see now here Wyatt Darby on a mulligan to 6, and that is a real clunker. Oh my goodness me. Double Hazrat, triple Mountain, and Aethersphere Harvester, but he's got to keep it. We can have a look at what Hendricks is working with here, as he kept a full 7, and he looks to be a little bit happier with it, but Darby at the moment thinking about that strike. Going to go below decks, and he needs some early action.
He can't keep a mountain. Of course, that mountain would allow him to cast Hazrat on curve, but at the same time, his hand would just be full of cards. So what he needs instead, he has to draw into a curve now. Otherwise, this hand is just really, really bad.
Yeah, it's a real stinker now. But we do have a nice piece of interaction in the form of Chandra's defeat, taking care of Caries there, and a Soulscar Mage as well. So Wyatt Darby is drawing like a king. But Hendricks is perhaps drawing like an emperor here as we find a Goblin Chainwhirler off the top, and that's going to come down, contest that Soulscar Mage very nicely, and I would say Hendricks already with his Snood out in front.
Yeah.
Let's see what Darby's next move is. We did see double Hazrat, single Aethersphere Harvester, and with the mana to cast both of these cards now, 2 mountains in hand. Going to be the Harvester first up. And that can at least block the Chainwhirler.
Oh, that's exactly what it's for. It can block the Chainwhirler. You can crew it with any of your creatures. So I would expect Hendricks to just play a land and start go here. The really cool thing is that Hendricks is holding Hour of Glory. We talked about that during the sideboarding. And you know it has some extra flavor text?
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. Oh, no. Simon Gertzen. Say it ain't so, Simon Gertzen, because Hour of Glory, the hidden text... I mean, you look at the first 3 words. Exile target creature, good, sold. Don't even worry about anything any further. But, oh my goodness me, we are going to see a huge blowout here from Thomas Hendriks. I've never seen this happen. I've never seen this happen before, Simon.
It just doesn't happen very often.
This never happens, and we're going to see Thomas Hendriks cashing in this Hour of Glory for full value here if he snaps it off on this Hazrat the Fervent, because Darby is holding a second copy of it. Thomas Hendriks, the Flying Dutchman, is he going to be able to bring this ship into port? 4 mana available, Hour of Glory, target your Hazrat. Oh, no! Clean up on aisle 5. There is vomit everywhere after this disgusting play, and Wyatt Darby can't believe it.
That's a 2-for-1.
That is a stone cold 2-for-1 in from one of the most unexpected directions. But I mean, it's actually what the card does. Look at that, the Scorpion God taking apart Ronus. I mean, it's a flavor violation because Hazrat was the only god to survive, but still, we will take it, my friends. And Thomas Hendriks, so far ahead now with a Glory Bringer to follow it up.
What a beautiful use of a one-off sideboard card.
The man cannot be contained. So a Glory Bringer comes across, exerting, taking care of that Soulscar Mage, and Hendricks is just on fire here. Darby with a lone Goblin Chainwhirler in hand. It's not going to be enough for him to meaningfully contest what Hendricks is doing, and you can see he's reeling in his seat.
Well, you mulligan, you keep a hand with 2 Hazards that doesn't have much else.
Whoa.
And then you get Hour of Glory.
I mean, I feel like a real fool because I was talking about how Vraska's Contempt is just always the better card, and then look at this. Thomas Hendriks.
Strictly better.
He's got a serviette wrapped over his arm as he serves me a steaming bowl of my own words.
It's good for Darby, though, that he found a way to crew the Harvester here for one more turn.
And that Glory Bringer now on the, take a bit of a breather now as after it's been exerted. So the pressure is taken off a little bit. Take that pressure down for just a second here, Thomas Hendriks, as he cycles away a Canyon Slough and finds a Soulscar Mage. His hand is pretty quiet at the moment.
Yeah, very quiet. And Soulscar Mage has basically no impact on this battlefield. Maybe you combine it with Glorybringer's trigger, but that kills most creatures anyway.
We see the really nice impact of Goblin Chainwhirler with Soulscar Mage, putting -1/-1 counters on creatures. We saw that in the previous quarterfinals, of course. May not happen right here and right now, but all of a sudden, Soulscar Mage is the favoured one-drop.
It's nice that Thomas sneaks in 3 damage here. He's probably hoping that Darby doesn't have another creature to follow up with, and in this case, the Chainwhirler would deal 3 either way, because it can also just crew the Harvester. Of course, if Darby drew a creature here, that math changes a little bit. And Hendricks might actually just throw his Soulscar Mage in front of the Chainwhirler to soak up some damage.
Both players evenly poised at 12 life. We've seen Darby take a real savage beating from Hendricks, but his draws haven't panned out too well, the Dutchman here. And as a result, Wyatt does have a little bit of an opportunity to continue to get his foot back in the door. But the Glorybringer is back online now. 2 lands for Thomas Hendricks. He's really flooding out.
Yeah, he does have the second Black Source to activate if near Deadlands, though.
And Darby now with a Chandra's Defeat as well, meaning the Dragon isn't going to get busy. So Hendricks left with some interesting options as to whether he wants to attack. This Aethersphere Harvester is really putting in work.
Yeah, and activating if near Deadlands on Goblin Chainwhirler is terrible, because you're leaving your opponent with a 1/1 First Striker that can still crew the Harvester.
Yeah, you want a straight up kill spell, but it's a Dragon Skull Summit instead here for Hendricks. Oh dear, and he's more or less has to do that, the Deadlands activation. He's just got nothing else to do with his turn at all. Mountain in hand here for Hendricks. Wyatt Darby finding more action off the top of his library. Is that a Lightning Strike that I saw?
Just a Lightning Strike.
Crew up the Aethersphere Harvester, and in it comes 3/5, knocking Hendricks down to 6. And Darby, all of a sudden, after a disgusting blowout on turn number 4, is looking to take this one home.
But if Darby loses his Chainwhirler here, then Thomas is suddenly winning.
Ooh, all right. Now we have a Rekindling Phoenix off the top. Does that change things here, Simon?
Oh, absolutely, yes. But it doesn't win the game for Hendricks. It's still super interesting, because Darby, if he spends his Lightning Strike on the Phoenix, he only gets in for 3. If he attacks with his Harvester and Hendricks blocks, then he's risking to die on the backswing. So that might force Darby into a defensive position. Super interesting and close.
Darby down to 4 now. Is advantaged by bouncing around like it's on a trampoline. As the Rekindling Phoenix represents a lethal threat here for Hendricks. Darby, what are his options here? He can Lightning Strike the Phoenix. He can hope to rip the spiciest of hot sauce off the top of his library here.
I don't think he can do anything at the end of turn. I think he needs more information. He needs to check the top of his deck and then make his mind up. Because, for example, if you draw another removal spell, then you know that Lightning Strike to the face wins you the game this turn.
Very, very interesting position here for Wyatt Darby. He's going to have to play this one very carefully indeed, because this game is poised on the edge of a knife, and if he strays but a little, he will fall.
The only reason to cast the Lightning Strike at end of turn would be if you draw a 4 or 5 draw, but I think if you draw Glorybringer, for example, you don't have to cast the Lightning Strike. You're winning anyway.
Darby draws his hand, Lightning Strike, and a mystery card. It's an Earthshaker Kenra. Cannot target the Phoenix with its ability here, but it can, of course, as another hasty creature, and it can crew the Harvester.
It can also target the egg, right? So if Darby kills the Phoenix, Hendricks gets an egg, the Kenra prevents the egg from blocking, and Darby has 5 points of damage.
So here we go. Wyatt Darby. On-board lethal, I understand.
No, 5 damage.
Oh, 5 damage, only 5.
I don't see a way to deal 6 here. unless Hendricks doesn't block the Aethersphere Harvester. But why would he not block?
So let's see how Darby wants to play this. We're going to see an Earthshaker Kenra. Okay, taking a different line here, Simon.
He has to. He didn't find a way to get through.
And now, back to Hendricks. Mountain for the Dutchman. This game's so close. Just a hair between these players. We have Darby slightly advantaged here, but it really is anyone's game at this point. Heart-pounding magic as these players try to find a way forward, Simon.
And I don't think there is one. I don't think there are texts for either player.
So it is going to come down to the cards on the top of the libraries here, although Darby does have a nice one with Lightning Strike in hand. Oh, rip that second Lightning Strike. Make us both look like fools for the huge burn out there.
Or just any removal spell for the Phoenix.
That Rekindling Phoenix, the only thing preventing the Aethersphere Harvester from connecting right now. And the Goblin Chain Wielder reduced to a 1/1. Those are -1/-1 counters on the Chain Wielder just there. So a 1/1 First Striker. Earthshaker Kenra as well. I tell you what, I bet Darby wouldn't mind having that one in his bin in addition to another land.
If you ask me, Hendricks is currently just pretending like he has something. We know he's holding 2 lands, but if he just passes, maybe it's too obvious. But with such a weak hand, I don't expect him to attack. In fact, letting Darby put his Earthshaker Kenra in the graveyard, to me, seems like a big risk.
And did you see Wyatt's raw focus there? His eyes were flicking between the battlefield and Hendricks. He's not wanting to miss a moment. He wants to know what his opponent's up to. Darby draws, finds. Was that a Chandra off the top there for him?
I think it's a Glory Bringer.
It might even be a Glory Bringer here. A massive 4/4 comes down. Hendricks nods his head. We're going to crew up the Aethersphere Harvester. A lethal attack force in the air. Exert on the Rekindling Phoenix. 7 damage coming your way. Hendricks reveals 2 mountains and a shake of the hand will close out our quarterfinal here. Wyatt Darby, a smile on his face as he puts himself into the semi-finals, Simon, of Pro Tour Dominaria.
Well played.
Well played. GG. WP. And I tell you what, a well-deserved victory for Wyatt Darby. One of the coolest hands I've seen in the feature match area for quite a while.
Really focused in the zone. Absolutely impressive. These matchups are not easy, and you can see that sometimes it hinges on a single card drawn, where you point a removal spell, how quickly you come out of the gates, and Darby did not have a good start.
No, he didn't, and after that Hour of Glory really tempted him to mess with his headspace, his psychological game. We talked about the importance of getting your brain zone right. Full credit to Wyatt Darby after a very, very impressive performance. We've got to go to a break, ladies and gentlemen, but stick around because, of course, the semi-finals of Pro Tour Dominaria are up next, and you're not going to want to miss them. We'll see you soon.
Grab a friend and head into battle with Magic's upcoming release, Battle Bond. Play sealed or booster draft as you pair up in this 2-headed giant casual format. Available at your local game store starting June 8th. Find your store at locator.wizards.com.
Hi there, welcome back to the news desk. Maria Bartholdi joined by Paul Chian, and while our players get a little bit of lunch, Paul, you were in the booth earlier this morning. What was the quarterfinals all about for you?
Well, we had the one control deck, and I was kind of hoping to see maybe if we could see that control deck kind of fight its way, but it was not to be, as the chain whirlers proved to be way too powerful. And just kind of my takeaway so far is just, it's really kind of all up in the air. I think going first is incredibly important, of course, in all formats, but especially here where you really want to have a board presence and then follow that up with those heavy hitters following that up. And so, I mean, we saw a mono-red deck defeat the red-black deck, but then we also saw the red-black deck beat the mono-red deck. And the thing is, at the end of the day, like, these decks are still sharing a lot of cards. So you're just going to have a lot of very similar draws. So again, I just think, you know, being first is like very, very important here.
All right, well, somebody that's headed on to our semifinals is Wyatt Darby, and he's on the floor with BDM.
Thanks, Maria. And Wyatt Darby's facing an age-old decision, one of the real struggles of being in the top 8 of a Pro Tour, trying to figure out exactly what to do about his flight.
Yeah, I think it might need to be delayed. You know, it's red mirrors, but I do, as everyone saw, I do love a good tank. So it might be tight in making it, but hopefully that's the best problem to have on a Sunday.
Absolutely. Now, a problem you also faced on Sunday was a tough game 3 with an hour of glory giving you a real kick there. What happened, and how did you right the ship there?
So yeah, Mulligan's had a hand that had Harvester and 2 Hazrats, some of the best cards in the matchup from my experience. And you know, once that Hazrat got taken, the one out of my hand too, I thought I was pretty dead. But you know, we strung together some really excellent draws, was able to be just aggressive enough to sneak in those last few points of damage, and I was fortunate, you know, he bricked on his last couple draw steps with just some lands. So everything came together perfect to recover from a pretty crazy blowout.
And you had some practice against that blowout potential overnight, right?
Oh yeah, Matt Severa got me with that play 2 or 3 times last night. So I got all my tilt out of my system. This one was just, well, like, okay, we'll just have to go from here and recover best we can.
Now, I've been so impressed with your presence at the table. Again, this is only your second Pro Tour of experience. How are you able to remain so calm and seem to really enjoy the moment so much? That's something that sometimes takes a lot of people a long time to appreciate.
Yeah, you know, being pretty much an amateur in every respect before this, this is just it's just an excellent experience. And for me, you know, I was thinking, hey, day 2's awesome. And this is a kind of a free roll at this point. I'm just going to do everything I can to keep playing well. And I'm loving it. This is exactly where I want to be when it comes to Magic.
All right. He's playing on day 3 above expectations. He said it's a free roll. Maybe it's fast enough to get him onto his plane. We'll see. Sending it back to you guys.
Thanks so much, BDM. Yeah, I hope he is able to make his flight. All right, let's take a look at the bracket and kind of review where we were this morning and where we're headed this afternoon. First up, Kazuyuki Takimura on red-black mid-range versus Marcio Carvalho red-black aggro. This is a very close matchup and went to 5 games. In the end, Marcio Carvalho takes it with red-black aggro. Our second quarterfinal, Ernest Lim on Esper Control versus Gonzalo Pinto on red-black aggro. In the end, Gonzalo Pinto got there, taking down the lone blue player in our top 8. 3 games to 0. Angrath, the Flame Chain, stealing a Gear Hulk for the win was pretty cool, wasn't it, Paul?
Yeah, that was really, really exciting. And now we're going to actually have a 75-card mirror going into the semifinals. These are actually 2 close friends, and they tested together, and it must be a little bit sad that they're seeing each other in the semis instead of the finals.
They also saw each other in round 1, by the way.
Oh, wow.
Which is pretty funny. Our quarterfinal number 3, Thomas Hendriks versus Wyatt Darby. That was red-black aggro versus mono-red aggro. Wyatt Darby, of course, as we just heard, got that one. He is a pure mono-red aggro, only running mountains here in this top 8. And quarterfinal number 4, Owen Turtenwald, 3-0 sweep there as well over Manuel Lenz. Red-black aggro coming over the top of mono red aggro, and that was just a brutal chain whirler we saw versus a couple of Earthshaker Kenras going down, Paul.
Yeah, that's, I mean, kind of the reason why people have decided to move into the direction of red-black and not play Earthshaker Kenra is because of the existence of the chain whirler, and you really got to see its full effect on display in that matchup.
I mean, it's not without danger playing X1s around right now.
Definitely.
All right, so Dominaria, a set full of history, and it has come the time for part 3 of the completely and unquestionably accurate history of Dominaria, the Phyrexian invasion.
The Phyrexians are invading! So the crew gets back, and they see the Phyrexians are invading, and Gerard is like, again with the Phyrexians!
You know, there was Wrath, like that whole plane, and it was like an artificial plane, and it was weird and kind of evil, and like, whoa, what's all that about? Well, it turns out the Phyrexian plan is to overlay Wrath onto Dominaria. So like, if you imagine, like, if you had this orange and you wanted to invade this orange, and so you like kind of peeled another smaller orange and just kind of smashed them together, and then that was your invasion plan somehow, that's what the Phyrexians were trying to do. So then, wow, like now there's like fighting all over, and it's the Phyrexian invasion, and you know, Urza's kind of trying to lead the charge, and the navigator of the Weatherlight, Hannah, dies. Then also she's like Gerard's girlfriend, so he gets all sad and brooding and like angry, and that's very sad.
No! Urza put together a super team of super planeswalkers to invade Phyrexia, to blow it up, basically. And so he made these things called the Titan engines, which were these giant mech suits that all the planeswalkers could wear, and each one was customized to their user.
So like Urza and his like super team of planeswalkers go into Phyrexia in their giant robot suits, and they're stomping around. They brought like awesome people, you know, like good guys from across the multiverse, and also Tevesh Zot, who is just the worst. He is the worst. And then while they're in Phyrexia, for just kind of no reason, Tevesh Zot goes amok and just kills two of the planeswalkers that are with them.
Urza had installed this thing called a kill rubric. He could just push a button and kill any planeswalker that was in the Titan suit. And surprisingly enough, he didn't tell anyone about this. Urza just said, all right, that's it. Boop, push the button. Tevesh Zot was dead, and Urza sucked his soul out and used it to power the soul bomb that they would use to blow up Phyrexia. Baron's like, this is messed up. Like, you can't just suck people's souls out and use them to power, you know, weapons of mass destruction. That's messed up stuff there. Urza's like, it's okay. Tevesh Zot was a criminal. He murdered someone. It's totally fine, completely above board. And Baron's like, did you know he was gonna do that? Urza was like, yeah, I knew. So Urza had the soul bomb all ready to go, and he kind of sat there and looked around for a minute, just like, all right, what have I been doing with my life up until now? I'm several thousand years old. I've been making lots of sweet machines that are really good at killing people. And he looked around at Phyrexia, and it was an entire plane that was just one giant sweet machine designed for killing people. He was like, what am I doing? I can't blow this up. This place is great.
Urza's in his head, man. He's like, he's got this plan for these soul bombs, right? That's gonna take out Phyrexia once and for all. But the more he thinks about it, he's like, you know what? I'm just gonna surrender. That's a much better plan. And that's what he does. So we know that somewhere along the way, like Hannah dies. We know this, right? And Gerard, this hits him pretty hard because he's like, Hannah. So Hannah being dead, it kind of bothers him. So then Yawgmoth, the big baddie, comes to talk to Gerard. Yawgmoth says, hey Gerard. Sorry, I'm making a voice for him. So then Yawgmoth comes to talk to Gerard. Goes, hey Gerard, I am Yawgmoth. I could bring back the love of your life, Hannah, if you just join me. And Gerard's like, okay. And so Gerard joins him, and then Urza's always, who's been captured as well, they bring them to the Phyrexian arena, and Gerard and Urza must fight in the Phyrexian arena. Gerard is given a mighty sword. And then in fight, Gerard decapitates Urza, takes off his head off the body.
Gerard, holding this halberd in one hand and Urza's severed head in the other hand, escapes from Phyrexia, goes back to Dominaria, and then Urza says, hey up there, I'm still alive down here. I don't actually need a body. Do you need any help? I've calmed down a little bit, and I'm ready to defeat the Phyrexians for real this time.
So we're well into the Phyrexian invasion now, and like Yawgmoth is like, okay, it is finally time for me to show up in person and set foot on Dominaria, not foot exactly, but whatever, on Dominaria for the first time in like 9,600 years or something. I mean, he's not super precise about it. He's like about 10,000 years, which is fine. I'm coming back, baby, I am back. I could come back as anything. Oh, I know, how about I'll come back to Dominaria as a hemisphere-spanning cloud of black death and plague. So, nobody really recognizes him when he comes back. It's like, did you cut your hair or something? Like, oh no, you transformed into a hemisphere-spanning cloud of black death and plague. I knew you looked different. So it's time for the crew of the Weatherlight to step up and stop him. So they take basically all of the stuff that they've collected on their journey, and it supercharges the Weatherlight into like this super Yawgmoth killing thing. And Gerard rips Urza's eyes out and like slams them together, and there's this huge explosion, and Yawgmoth is destroyed in like a rainbow, which sounds really made up, I know. But yeah, no, there's like this rainbow, and then Yawgmoth is dead, and everything is great, except that most of the characters who we've been following all this time are dead. Gerard is dead, and Urza is dead, and Krovax is dead, and Miri is dead, and Hannah is dead, and Baron is dead, and like several million Dominarians are dead. So like a lot of people are dead, but to Urza's credit, other people are not dead. So like, nice job, man. So Sisse and Tongarth and Squee are like respectfully remembering everybody who died or whatever, and then like, where there's like a funeral and there's like a mysterious person at the funeral and you're like, it's you, and they're like, yes. Well, in this case, it's Karn, he's okay, hooray. They thought he blew up when the legacy weapon rainbows thing happened, right? But no, Karn's okay, and he's like, I'm a planeswalker now. Urza's spark ended up in me. I contain multitudes. They're like, Karn, you are weird. He's like, And then, so Karn's a planeswalker now, and he can go be a sad robot all over the multiverse.
It was a lot of fun making those completely and unquestionably accurate History of Dominaria videos. I didn't know the original History of Dominaria going into creating those, and I learned quite the lesson about Urza and all the rest of the gang, and it was really cool to be able to talk with members of Creative Team and Mark Rosewater on their days reliving the original history of Dominaria and how crazy things really were back then. Big thanks to Megan Wolf for helping compile those stories. James Turner, of course, of Loading Ready Run for his epic portrayal of Urza, and Ashlyn Rose, who is a wonderful cosplayer as well. Well, yesterday we met Dana Fisher, who's 7 years old and a magic prodigy. And today we're going to take a trip back with Nathan Holt, who's one of the producers of Enter the Battlefield. Here at the Pro Tour, we've got the best players of the game from around the world competing on the game's biggest stage. But for a lot of them, and including Nate, it all started at home at the kitchen table. So let's go back home with Nate as he revisits his family playgroup.
Part of what makes Magic great is the never-ending feeling of discovery as the game evolves and we evolve with it. We react to our local meta, we fine-tune our deck lists, we hone the tiniest aspects of our play skill.
Equip creature gets +2.
That's pretty cool. And I like the picture of the cutlass.
But it's so easy to get consumed wondering what's next that I forget what brought me to Magic to begin with.
There we go. There it goes.
And so I, Nathan Holt, your producer and humble narrator, embarked on a small journey to the state of Maine to remember why I first came to love Magic. My older brother Chris lives in Portland with his wife and son. He's 12 years older than me, and for most of my childhood, we grew up apart. But when we did live together, he taught me how to play Dungeons and Dragons. He was the one that got me hooked on fantasy gaming.
Oh yeah. I could totally destroy you with this deck.
Years later, I was thrilled to return the favor. I taught Chris and his son Duncan how to play Magic.
Put the target card from your graveyard on top of your library.
I loved watching them discover the game, piece by piece. You could almost see a light bulb turn on every time they figured something out. I miss that feeling.
So you're going first, and because it's more than 2 players, you get to draw on your first turn, yeah.
Alright, here we go.
Draw ring. So I am Nathan Holt's older brother. Living with him when he was young and continuing to be in close touch with him as he grew up was great.
I have the Frost Lynx. It's going to breathe a frosty breath.
We were separated by a lot in terms of age, having different mothers, but the time that I did spend with them, I did feel really did bond us. And I will attack Nate with the Cleric of the Forward Order for 2.
I saw it coming. I'm at 18.
Sitting across from Nate and playing a game, it's funny. There's like there's an extra little electric charge. All right, so I'm gonna tap 4. Because our family's always played games, whether it was a vicious croquet game or Monopoly. We enjoy the fun, friendly side of cutthroat competition and like to laugh at each other as we either beat each other or lose to each other. And this really carries it on. I am going to attack Nate with all of this. Okay, so...
It's easy to forget that lots of Magic players have never played in a Grand Prix, PTQ, or even Friday Night Magic. Their cards may be unsleeved and well-worn. The decks may be stored with rubber bands and have few, if any, mythic rares. Double-faced cards may sit in plain sight on the tops of libraries, and nobody cares, because the metagame is all in the family.
Orc Pirate. Costs 1 swamp and 1 mountain.
We're gonna climb into my brother's car now, drive all the way to the rural regions of Upper Maine. My sister's an early bird, so I hope she has coffee for me. All right, let's climb in.
On a chilly spring morning, Chris, Duncan, and I drive to my sister Gudrun's house. She lives in the deep woods of Maine in a very small town. Her kids play Magic too. I may have had something to do with that. I'd love to get a game in, you know, if my brother remembers how to get to our sister's house.
I am going to back up and just double check that road.
Why don't we just pass Chisholm Pond Road?
I have gone down that road before and end up in the middle of the woods.
Right.
Chisholm Pond?
Pond. Chisholm Pond.
Well, that's probably not it. You're filming me. This is great. The most embarrassing spot.
We are coming up on my sister's house and her family. Let's go inside, hang out, play some Magic. Who are you? Big guy? High school student?
My older brother, Chris, and I played lots of games together. Dungeons and Dragons being one of them. I remember being, Princess Sapphire, right? Isn't that not Princess? What was she?
Priestess?
High Priestess Sapphire. I would be the little sister tagging along.
So these two are my allies, you know, for you, it's them two. So I'm just gonna be attacking you two.
Magic is great because Emma and Caleb, they're 6.5 years apart. And, you know, the little sister and the older brother, they don't always come together on what games they want to play, but Magic is one that they both agree on. It doesn't matter if you're old or young, boy or girl, we all get together and play.
What is our plan here? I don't know either.
And Uncle Nate was probably the one who introduced them to it, gave them their first deck of cards.
I'm gonna give John some sleep paralysis on this fella right here.
So he's snoozing.
I like to play green. I guess because I feel like you can amass like a pretty decent army with the green.
I prefer black because it's death and I like death.
Oh, nice.
What I like about competition is I like playing against other people and seeing their strengths and weaknesses so I can use their weaknesses against them and I can try and use my strengths to defeat their strengths.
Oh no!
Like on the field or in the court or on the table. Play a land and let's see, I have 3. What can I do? I like Magic because the art is really cool, and there's definitely some serious competition.
Yeah, when he enters the battlefield, creatures you control get +1/+1 till the end of turn. That means all of these have a +1/+1. Also brings this guy up to a 5/5, which means he's a 6/6.
Uncle Nate gives me packs every so often, and then sometimes he just gives me individual cards and says, hey, these would be good against your dad.
Okay, I'm ready to gang up on your dad.
What am I doing?
I'm not going to attack you anymore.
What am I doing with?
It was pretty cool when I had my kid and he became Uncle Nate. We reappeared in each other's lives, and he was a young adult now. And then he started having kids, and we now bond about being fathers. That was a 4/4, right? So
16. I'm dead.
Dang.
I think he's steamrolling us.
Awesome.
It's really cool to have this game that we play together and have my son into it. Every once in a while we're playing, we text Uncle Nate, hey, we got a rule question, we need a ruling on something. And it's nice to make him the referee, to make him the judge, and I'm just another player. So it becomes a fun way to stay in touch in and of itself. And yeah, that's fun.
Counterspell! Coming back home to Philadelphia, I go back to my quote-unquote casual playgroup where we end games of Commander on turn 6 with fancy foils, and I have a renewed appreciation for the game. Magic is 25 years old now, and it's clear that it's adept at passing from one generation on to the next. Perfect. So these pirates can go on the pirate ship. Any more that you want to put on the ship? As a parent myself, I'm just starting to see my first glimpses of mini planeswalkers in the making. Which one do you want?
I don't got this one.
Oh, that's a red Tyrannosaurus.
All 4 cards are gonna go in the mail.
In the mail?
Yeah. So
Where are they gonna go?
they are gonna go to Nan's house to drive that away. So, and then they're gonna go.
Well, we're not only crowning a champion here at this Pro Tour, but also our Draft Master and Constructed Master for excellence in drafting constructed over our 3 Pro Tours so far this season. But how did we get here? Enjoy the Road to Worlds.